and this is the Agegroup Multisport podcast with me, Richard Conway. This is a platform for age group multisport athletes to showcase their journeys. Welcome along to an impromptu episode 85 of the Agegroup Multisport podcast. It is Tuesday the 17th of October and the podcast as it stands was supposed to go out tomorrow, as they usually do, drop on a Wednesday. Unfortunately, I had an email from our guest and also a message on Instagram basically saying that she didn't want the episode to go out. So we're going to respect her wishes. So we've removed the recording from this episode and we're going to just put in a filler. So you've got, something to listen to. It's not going to be very long, unfortunately, of when Mrs. C met GTB. And GTB, for those who are not educated in the triathlon world, is Georgia Taylor-Brown, the British Olympic gold medalist, silver medalist, and I think she won the Commonwealth gold as well. We're going to delve into that story and tell you how it all came about. So that's coming up. Hope you're all well, and it's definitely got a little bit colder, hasn't it, over the last week. The temperatures have really dropped. I've still been out on my bike a couple of times, so that's not too bad, and been running outside still. It hasn't forced us indoors just yet. Even got a cross country coming up at the weekend, so that'll be interesting. The Achilles is holding up. I've got to wrap it up really tightly if I want to run. Hopefully it'll make the distance on Sunday. What do you do? Do you do any races over the winter? They reckon that cross-country for running and cyclocross for biking is pretty good training. What are your thoughts? Let me know. DM me in the social media apps. So who watched the World Championship race at Kona at the weekend? Well, I started watching it on Saturday evening, watched the swim and then watched some of the bike, went to bed, went to sleep, woke up, put it back on and finished watching the race. And what a race LCB, Lucy Charles-Barclay, had. So delighted for her after coming second 4 times, and she led from start to finish, and it was just so nice to see her reach her goals. This was a dream for her for a long time. She's worked so hard for it through injuries and everything else, and it's just really nice that it all came together. And if you haven't seen it, just go back and watch the highlights. There's loads of stuff on social media and on YouTube. It is well worth a watch. Been watching a bit of cyclocross. Tom Pidcock was over in Canada and he was taking part in his final race of the year. 2 races actually. There's the short course and the long course, and he dominated once again. Came from way back as he usually does and smashed it. Yeah, really impressive. So that was good to watch. Don't know what we're going to do now. There's not much triathlon after next weekend when the Super League final finishes, and there's not much cycling going on. So yeah, it's going to be a pretty quiet winter, I think. Couple of podcast recommendations, and the first one is, several of these, the Tri Hour. And before the Women's World Championships, he had all the top female guests on, including Laura Charles-Barclay, Taylor Knibb, Kat Matthews, all good listens, and really enjoyed listening to those, so I can definitely recommend those. And British Tri had a podcast featuring Beth Potter, and she was just going over her fantastic win at the World Championship final, and that was a really good listen. And again, lovely to see her win. She's slowly been creeping up on the top athletes, and she's got there and top of the podium. So, and she did it very, very convincingly. Her run was amazing. So that was worth a listen to. I've just started reading a book called Ultra Processed People, and it was handed to me by teammate Karen Hames, who was on episode 35, so you can go back and listen to Karen's story. Very interesting. Anyway, she passed me this Ultra Processed People book, and it's written by Chris Van Tulken, and it's basically why do we all eat stuff that isn't food, and why we can't stop. And I've just started it, and I'm in probably about the third chapter. So it's so far very interesting. And if you've listened to this podcast for a period of time, you'll know that there was a time when I was putting lifestyle hacks at the end of each episode, and a lot of them was to do with food. And anybody who knows me knows that we're a bit strange when we come to our diet. Not eating up processed food, not eating dairy, not drinking tap water. I've currently stopped drinking alcohol. Don't eat meat. So most of our food, I would say, is cooked from scratch. I'm an ex-chef, so it's not a problem. And so this is right up my street. So I'm looking forward to seeing actually what's behind the curtain, shall we say. So I'll let you know how I get on. And if you are interested in those lifestyle hacks, just go back to, I can't remember what episodes they were on, but each one had a different episode, and it wasn't all about food. There was sleep in there, and how to improve basically our lifestyle. So yeah. Right, so we're going to get on to the main event, which isn't what we'd first planned, but however, I think the story is quite funny, and hope you enjoy listening to it. So we'll see you on the other side. So this is the story of how Mrs. C come to meet GTB, and it all began with an Instagram post, not by Georgia, but by Sophie Caldwell. And I think the background to this is, what you've got to understand is both myself and Mrs. C are avid watchers and followers of all things triathlon. Mainly Super League, and also the World Triathlon Series. And I've recently got into the middle distance viewing and even the longer distance, which can at times be boring. However, there's so many characters now within that sport and so many different races. I've really got hooked. Anyway, I digress. So we are massive fans of the sport, not just taking part in it, but also watching it. And from that standpoint, we also follow various athletes on Instagram and Facebook just to see what they're getting up to. And it was because of this, Mrs. C follows Sophie Caldwell, amongst others, and she saw that Sophie was selling a bike. It was last year's model, I believe, and she just acquired a new one. So after a bit of umming and ahhing, we decided that we would get in touch with Sophie and message her and say that we would be interested in looking at the bike. So after several WhatsApp messages and numerous pictures that Sophie kindly sent through, we decided that we would go along to Loughborough and have a look and see if it fit, firstly. And so we did. So after a bit of organisation over WhatsApp of date and time, because obviously Sophie trains and it has to fit around that, and also had to fit for us, we went over one Sunday morning, a couple of hours over to Loughborough, and we had a look. And it was obviously, we took the van over because we thought we were going to bring the bike back, all excited. Got there, beautiful bike, really good condition. Unfortunately, it was just too big, and very disappointed. We tried dropping the seat, we tried everything really, but unfortunately, no point in spending that kind of money on a bike that's not going to fit. So yeah, disappointed, but shit happens, eh? It was really nice to meet Sophie and her husband Tom, who's an ultra runner for those who don't know. Really nice guy. And on one parting shot, Sophie mentioned that Georgia Taylor Brown was looking to sell one of her bikes, and she knew that it was a smaller size than the one that we'd just looked at, so it might fit the bill. So with that in mind, we jumped back in the van and made our 2-hour trip back home. And I've got to say, you can imagine it wasn't a very happy trip. I'm not saying Mrs. C was sulking at all, but she was very, very disappointed. And then it was a few days later, she was humming and hawing, and she took the bull by the horns and she got in touch with Georgia. And Georgia, bless her, she was straight back and said, yep, I am selling the bike, and you're more than welcome to come across and have a look at it. But again, it took a while because we were just about to go on holiday for a fortnight, and Georgia was away as well. So Mrs. C kept in touch with her, and she sent over some photographs of the bike, and it was the more up-to-date bike that she was selling rather than last year's. So it was this year's bike, because they've all now just got SL8s, which has just come out. So yeah, so even better. Lovely colour. It's like a plummy colour, plum over black, and yeah, it looked really nice from the photographs. So we got back off holiday and straight back into work. So busy trying to catch up, as you do. So another week went by, and then finally got back in touch with Georgia and asked her when it was appropriate to go over and have a look at the bike. And she said, yeah, come over this Sunday, which was actually last Sunday. So we did. So we piled up into the van again and had a 2-hour trip to Leeds, pulled up outside the house and went and had a look at the bike. And the first thing to greet us was Alfie, a dog, little cute thing. And the bike was out there waiting for us to have a look at and take for a spin. Georgia had kindly left the pedals on so we could give it a test ride. And while Mrs. C was straddling the bike to make sure it fit and it was comfortable, we were chatting about the bikes and about George's new bike, because she's just got, like I said, an SL8. I mentioned that I hadn't seen one in the flesh, so she went and showed me the new bike and all the other bikes that she had down there, and it was right Aladdin's cave. And she must have thought this guy's a bit random, because I asked her about Reap bikes. And for anybody who's heard this podcast before, you might have heard me mention about Reap. And they're the only British manufacturer of carbon frames in this country, which was started by Martin Mayer, who's been the owner of Cam Projects. I think Cam Projects specialise in composite products. They've diversified into making carbon frame bikes. So, and like I said, I realised that looking at their website that Georgia Taylor Brown had ridden one back in 2019 and 2020. So I quizzed her about it and wanted to know really what she thought of them. And she said it was a fast bike. Unfortunately, it wasn't very reliable. And that wasn't anything to do with the frame or anything. It was just the mechanics weren't tip-top. And obviously, being at her level, she needed that reliability. And unfortunately, it wasn't there at that time in their development. So, yeah, that was an interesting thing to find out from a personal point of view. So then we got on to the bike itself, the reason that we were there in the first place. And, yeah, loved it. So Mrs. C, big smile on her face, as you probably saw from the photograph that we put on social media. And she got herself a bike. So, a tale of two trips. One back from Loughborough, not so happy. One back from Leeds, very happy. So, yeah, we ended up with Georgia Taylor Brown's old bike. And, yeah, really, really pleased with it. And that's how Mrs. C came to meet GTB. And just while we're on the subject of, I noticed a post from Vicky Holland on a new bike. And I messaged her and I said, nice bike. My wife nearly bought that, but it was just too big. And she was gutted and sulked all the way home. And Vicky replied, your wife's loss was definitely my gain. Hope she's found something to fit. So it's all worked out nicely. Sophie sold her bike to Vicky. Vicky's now racing on it, trying to get back to qualify for the Olympics. And Mrs. C has got Georgia Taylor Brown's old bike. So, yeah, it's all worked out pretty well. So once again, apologies for not bringing you a normal episode. It was beyond my control, unfortunately, but got to take the wishes in, like I said, of the athlete that was supposed to be on the podcast. And hopefully we'll get her back on when she's ready. And we have got another one lined up, so that'll be coming out probably in a couple of weeks' time. Really good one. And if you would like to come onto the podcast and share your story as an age group athlete and inspire others, please do get in touch. And if you enjoy these episodes, please do leave us a rating and a review. Would be really cool, because it really does help us get out to more people, and it improves our profile. So once again, thank you for taking your time out to give this very short episode a listen. And get in touch through email at agegroupmultisportpodcast@gmail.com. We're on Instagram at amp_1967. We're on Facebook at ampgb. We're on Twitter at agegroupmultisportpodcast. And we're on YouTube at ampgb. And that's it for now. So don't forget, stay safe, keep training, and love the process.